January meeting, January 3rd meeting of the Simsbury Zoning Commission. I'm still new at this role of leading the meeting, but my name is Bruce Elliott, and I'm the chairman of the commission. I just need to get my notes out. I'll be a moment here. Just to remind everyone who probably some already know this, but it's our goal every time we gather to give fair consideration and courteous consideration to the matters that come to us from the residents of Simsbury. And now for the record, I need to confirm attendance of our members. And I can see that Josh Michelson is not here. Anybody else that's missing that we can see? No, I guess that's it.
Everybody else.
Yeah, Josh is an alternate, and all of our members are here, so there's not a need for alternates, but we have two alternates seated right here, so if something happens. Now, our next agenda item calls on review and action on the minutes of 4 meetings that we had in the month of December. And I hope everybody has had an opportunity to take a look at those minutes. A couple of meetings are very short minutes, and then a couple are more than that. So let's start, and we'll go in date order. So December 4th, and I ask for anyone who has suggestions as to corrections or additions that should be made, please sort of chime in if you have a comment, change for December 4th. Not hearing any, I think can I assume that there's consensus the minutes are satisfactory for December 4th? And now on to December 6th. Comments, corrections, additions on December 6th? Again, hearing no remarks, I am going to assume that it's satisfactory as submitted. And then December 18th, there's a substantial set of minutes for that meeting. It was our meeting 2 weeks ago that included a lot of public input. And I personally thought that the person who did those minutes did a great job. It's very thorough, and I thought well done. But that doesn't mean perfect, but very well done considering the bulk of the assignment there was. So
I do have a couple of comments. On line 50, I think there's a develop should not be in there. It should be either develop or establish. On line 88, I think there should be in between result and less. Let's see. On line 184, I believe there should be open before space. Line 244, I believe that should be significantly, not significant. And in 297, I suggest smaller instead of small.
any other comments or suggestions on the 18th of December minutes? Hearing none, we'll accept those changes as Tony reported them, and any concern about approving them with those changes, well, consider it done. Then the last minutes are for the meeting on December 21st. So that's a short one, but any comments, corrections, additions?
Mr.
Dave, you look
Chairman,
like you have something.
Line 14 and 15, we need to switch the commissioners. I was actually seated for Commissioner Sauls, and Josh Michelson was seated for Commissioner Braz.
Okay. Anything else?
Question. Are
Yes.
these minutes all available for townspeople to make meetings?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Sure. The minutes that we look at before the meeting are marked as drafts. So once they're approved at a meeting, then the draft heading is eliminated. But that takes care of the minutes. Then we've approved with the changes that were noted, the minutes of all 4 meetings. I'd like to have a motion from a commission member to approve those 4.
I'll make the motion to
Okay.
approve the minutes as the 4 meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you, Diane. A second, please. Tony got the second. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay.
Chairman, I'm abstaining on the December 6th and the December 21st minutes.
All right. Okay, the next item is, has to do with the appointment of a successor, to fill a vacancy on the DRB. I don't know if it's actually a successor, I guess it must be a successor for our new member, Kate Beal. It's a position on the DRB, and I think everyone got a little bit of information on this one, but the Republican Town Committee identified a candidate. Now, let me find my notes.
Do you want the, Bruce, do you want the, like, summary, or Andrew Tarple is his name?
No, I have an even more modest summary, but, so, the nomination transmitted to us from the Republican Town Committee is for Andrew Tarpill, Tarpill, to take the vacancy that exists now on the DRB. Andrew's a licensed architect in the state of Connecticut. He's a graduate of Norwich University. He now lives in West Simsbury, and he's affiliated with an architectural firm in Farmington. So he fits the outline suggested in on the town website for the DRB and what the credentials are expected or hoped for the people filling roles on the DRB. So I would appreciate a motion from a member to approve the nomination to have Andrew Tarple fill that vacancy on the DRB.
Move to approve Andrew Tarple for nomination for the DRB.
Thank you, Kate. And a second? Thank you, Shannon. The motion is approved then, and Andrew's, oh, excuse me, I'm going too fast here. We do need a vote. We have a motion and we have a second and a vote. So all in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The motion passes then, and Andrew is duly appointed to the DRB. Our primary purpose, I think, as everyone knows tonight, is to take up or to resume the public hearing that we started on this on the 18th of December on the application 2338 regarding further development on the land at 200 Hot Meadow Street. I thought it would be helpful at our meeting 2 weeks ago, and I know there's a different group of people. I wanted to just share, and I'll stop doing this at some point, but some guidelines on how we want to run the public hearing meetings, just the process. And so I want to read something that's going to take a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes to read, but it's an outline on the guidelines for how we'll operate the meeting. And I hope for people who haven't been here before for a public hearing or are at home watching on TV, this is how we want to do it. Except for a continuation like tonight, the vice chairman, we start this with the vice chairman reading the legal advertisement for the application that is the basis for the meeting. So in the case of continuations, as is this meeting, the that hearing notice doesn't need to be read again. But following that, planning staff, the next bullet, planning staff will summarize the request. Then the applicant and its representatives will provide a presentation on their proposal. And then the commission asks questions of the staff or the applicant. The chairman will next recognize members of the public wishing to provide comments, testimony, or raise questions, all of which must be restricted to the topic of the legal notice announcing the meeting. There's no particular order for comment, speakers. Proponents, opponents, neutral parties may be intermixed. And due to time considerations, the chairman may place a time limitation on public comment. All persons recognized shall approach the podium in order to facilitate proper recording of their comments. And before speaking, it's requested that each person give their name and full address before starting to speak. The commissioners may ask questions of those making public comments, and the chairman shall assure an orderly hearing and shall take steps necessary to maintain the order and decorum of the hearing at all times. The chairman shall reserve the right to limit debate in the event the discussion becomes unruly. Maybe it gets ugly sometimes too. I don't know, but I've been to a lot of these. But further concern if it becomes unmanageable or excessively repetitive. Please refrain from outbursts such as cheering, clapping, or yelling. And please silence all phones and other personal electronics. After public comments are completed for the evening, the applicant shall have the opportunity to address the commission in response to comments received, but not to introduce any new information. At any time during the hearing, the chairman shall allow reports and comments from the planning department and other town staff. Following conclusion of the applicant's presentation and public comments, the zoning commission will discuss the application and decide on further action. Now, just one more housekeeping chore before we get into the speakers. In addition to town departments and staff already engaged in evaluating application 2338, I would also like to have the benefit, we did that already, of the planning commission's input. Now I think that's it in terms of the guidelines, so that should be easy, right? Now I think we're ready to start the hearing. We don't need the legal notice again, so I'm going to go to our town planner, George McGregor, is going to give an update on additional information that's come in since we met on December 18th. So, George, I can see you're ready to go.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, I'm just going to run you through five updates just for the record, as well as kind of go through one by one the alternative compliance requests that the applicant has. We didn't really review them line by line at the last public hearing, but it's in the staff report, but I was going to just summarize them for you. I think it might be beneficial to that understanding. First, some updates. The applicant has submitted a fiscal impact study. It was attached to the website, put in your Dropbox. It was received on 12/27/23. That fiscal impact study has been distributed to the school district, town administration, the finance director, fire district, EMS, and all other town departments. We have not received any response to that. Obviously, it's a couple of days before New Year's, so we do expect some response to that, but that has been distributed and received, and it's available to the public as well. I have sent comments this morning to the applicant with questions and concerns about the study, and the applicant did respond. Those items are not in your Dropbox yet, since it happened late in the afternoon. They are in front of you, and I will make them part of the public record and get them in the Dropbox, as well as on the website after this meeting. 2, subsequent to the December 18th public hearing, staff has received additional comments from the public in terms of written comments. I think there are actually some comments tonight in my email, so anything, if the commission closes the public hearing tonight, anything in my box at 7 p.m. would obviously be for the public record. But we did receive a number of letters from Gilbert, Boyko, Messino. Those have been added to your Dropbox materials, except for the stuff that I might have gotten this evening. The commission has referred the application to the Planning Commission for a review for POCD conformance, Plan of Conservation and Development Conformance. That meeting is scheduled for January 9th, so they will meet next week to review your referral request. We would hope that they would provide comment to you by January 17th, public hearing, if it is so scheduled and so ordered. The staff report, I've revised the staff report. There's one sentence that I found was missing in a review of the alternative compliance. So I've revised the staff report. It's got a new date of 1/3/24, and I would make that, I would offer that for the public record as well.
George, is that the only change in the staff report?
It's the only change.
Okay.
It's the only change. And then again, I'll get that up and posted as soon as tomorrow comes. Timelines, finally, a word about timelines. Under Connecticut state law, once you open a public hearing, it has to be concluded within 35 days after opening. So just for timeline's sake, 35 days after opening is January 22, which is just after your January 27th meeting. As such, under those guidelines, under those requirements, the public hearing would need to be closed on your January 27th, or January 17th date. After that, you have 65 days after you close the public hearing to render a decision, but you can't take any more public input, you can't receive any more new information. I would note that those periods may be extended with concurrence from the applicant up to a period of an additional 65 days.
Okay, and just one more interruption. The 27th is the date for closing the hearing or a decision date?
January 22nd
17th.
is the.
17th, and then the 27th,
January-
22nd.
So you meet on January 17th.
Yeah.
The date that the hearing must be closed by is January 22nd. You don't meet again after January 17th. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. You would need extensions in place
Right.
on the 17th.
But my point was that the 17th is a date for closing the hearing. It's not a date for a decision on the application.
That's correct. You would have 65 days to make a decision after that. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to try to run.
But no additional information. Right? We have 65 days, but no
Okay.
Hey, Britt, would you just hit that for me, please? My reader's on. Just hit space bar. I apologize. Point of an alternative compliance application. That's actually why we're here tonight. The alternative compliance under the Hartford-Simsbury form-based code is what triggers the public hearing. If you had an application under the form-based code that conformed specifically and identically to all the requirements of the form-based code, it does not require a public hearing. The applicant has asked for essentially 10 standard changes to the standards of the Hartford-Simsbury form-based code. It is permitted under the code, and that's why we're here. Some of it is more conceptual, and some of it's like a little inside baseball on zoning, height, setback, those kinds of things. So if I go through them kind of quickly. Okay, Section 7 talks about the big picture of the types of uses that are required to conform under the Hartford-Simsbury form-based code. So what you see here is, this might be easier to explain to start. So you've got essentially 2 paragraphs in a staff note. This again comes directly from the staff report. I have not added anything for tonight's hearing. This is what's in the staff report. So the top paragraph is what the requirement is under the code. Underneath is what the applicant is proposing as a modification or a change when we're looking at this. So the first is regarding the mix of types. And in this case, it deals with the neighborhood transition use. So the requirement is that this zone shall provide for use and scale transitions within a walkable neighborhood context from any neighborhood commercial and the adjoining neighborhood or clustered neighborhood. The applicant is proposing to change that to allow the transition to any adjoining neighborhood, commercial neighborhood, or cluster zone. So the point of the staff note is that this change to the component zone description is necessary in order for this project to be 100% residential only. The neighborhood transition assumes that it transitions from commercial to neighborhood under the current code. This is a technical requirement that is actually not even a modification. So the zone requires that the applicant establish, at the time of this submission, the required area for doors and windows on the street facade. So again, if you think about the Hartford-Simsbury form-based code, it calls for a little bit more urban environment. And so buildings are closer to the street. The human scale gets us closer to the street. In this case, it asks the applicant to say, how are those facades going to be? And the applicant is proposing 20 feet between doors and windows and 20% of the primary facade area to be designated for doors and windows. It isn't really a change. It asks the applicant to provide those standards. I'm going the wrong way all the time. This portion of Section 7 deals with ground floor elevation, which in the current code says that for buildings close to the street, essentially 10 feet from the property line, they should be raised a minimum of 18 feet above the finished level of the sidewalk. The applicant is asking to remove that minimum of 18 inches, 19 feet. To remove that minimum, that would be quite a ramp for a staircase. To remove the 18 inches, and the applicant stated that getting to an 18-inch minimum interferes with ADA accessibility, particularly related to the inclusion of stairs and ramps with buildings so close to the street. Section 7B and all those Roman numerals deals with frontage, the frontage of streets and how buildings look along the frontage. Essentially, the requirement is it's got to have buildings have to be on 65% of the lot or the block's frontage. The applicant is asking for a change that would say, yes, 65%, unless it's constricted by environmental elements, wetlands, open space, those kinds of things. And again, staff just notes that there are wetlands on site and they do interrupt block continuity. This section, again, this is all in Section 7B. We just did that. Here we go. Section 7B. This portion says that a surface parking lot cannot be adjacent to a street or an intersection. The applicant is asking to revise it to allow a surface parking lot to be adjacent to a street or intersection so long as it is buffered or screened. So in this case, I simply note this project proposes at least 2 parking areas that terminate or are adjacent to the street intersection. 7B, 7E deals with garage setbacks. I think if you remember during the public presentation, there's a requirement in the code that says the garage, or a garage for a single-family unit or a duplex unit where there are garages, that it shall be set back at least 3 feet from the front facade of the home. The applicant is asking that the garages do not need to be set back from the front facade of the single-family homes. If you look at some of their architectural renderings, those there are portions where there is a garage and there's a secondary portion of the structure, and they are in line and not set back. Again, a real kind of a bigger picture element. This section says that the neighborhood component zone, which is just a straight residential zone, single-family residential or kind of lower density residential. It says that it can be no more than 50% of the Hartford South site. It says it specifically. The applicant is asking for a revision to this component zone that would essentially include net acreage instead of gross acreage. Staff's note on this is that we think that the purpose of the 50% limitation is to ensure a mix of uses on the site. Using net acreage might make sense, but it would be up to the commission to see whether they're satisfied with the overall development components. The applicant is asking for an area of the front multi-use trail that is adjacent to wetlands and steep slopes to reduce the required 12-foot wide path to 8 feet. The applicant is also asking where we have a required minimum setback of 100 feet from all designated wetlands. The applicant is asking where the site has already been disturbed that they be permitted to construct and to develop. So anywhere that was previously disturbed, even if it was within the 100 feet, they would like permission to do that. And again, they have to ask you for that as part of this process. And then finally, this is kind of the inside baseball stuff. There's a development standard table. The applicant is asking to go from the required 50 foot in height to 55 feet. Now again, in the 4 stories are permitted in this component zone, but it's limited at 50 feet. They're asking to go to 55 feet. They're asking for a change in maximum block perimeter, which is 2,000 feet. They're asking to be able to do that unless there's a case where it's split by open space or community amenity. They're asking to allow both undivided and divided streets. In the current code allows for undivided, or calls for undivided streets and not divided streets. 3E talks about, again, also about streets, this time parking. We allow street parking in the Hartford-Simsbury form-based code. We allow either parallel or angled parking. It does not allow head-in, perpendicular, or front-end. The applicant is asking for permission to do that as well. Applicant is also asking regarding tree planting. We've got a requirement to that either tree wells or tree planters are required. The applicant is asking to either do planters or simply planted trees without the tree well or planter. So that's it. The applicant, I'm sure, has his own perspective on this, but I would thought good idea to get it on the public record to at least know that those were the modifications the applicant is asking for. That's all I have as an update.
But as a point of clarification, all of those requested changes are reflected in the drawings? Is it an accurate statement?
They are reflected in the drawings,
Okay.
that's correct. In the master site development plan.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Thanks, George. For the next period, the applicant has the floor to add some additional information, and they want to comment on the analysis that was submitted, that's available too for all to see. I've forgotten who you said was which. There are going to be multiple speakers on this, and after this is concluded, we'll do public audience. So it's the same sequence as we used at the last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. Once again, my name is Paul Vitaliano. I'm a civil engineer with VHB. We're located at 100 Great Meadow Road in Weathersfield, Connecticut. With me today is Holden Sabato from SL Simsbury LLC, with the Silverman Group, Laura Krosky, our architect from Krosky Architects, and Gina Martini, a planner at VHB who prepared an economic study, which is going to be really the main focus of our presentation here. So really, Mr. Chairman, if obviously this meeting will run however you see fit, what we'd like to do with your permission is to start with the economic study, and then
You can't hear in the back of the room.
so I think the microphones are on. So, Mr. Chairman, we'd like
We
to.
might want to extend that arm so that it's out closer to your face.
It's pretty close.
Well,
So, Mr. Chairman, we'd like to start.
whoa.
We'd like to start with review of the economic study, and then I just have a few minor points to go over. Obviously, we heard the public comment last time. In 2 weeks, it's really kind of difficult to respond to all of them, and we really don't want to respond to all of them individually. What we did is we kind of looked at some of the overarching themes, and I feel in a few quick bullet points we can maybe address some of them. So, with your permission, we'd like to start with the economic study and do that. Permission granted?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Am I speaking loud enough? All right. No? Can you hear me now? Any better?
I think we need to fix.
I'll
the
talk
microphone.
loud. Okay, my name is Gina Martini. I'm a senior project manager with VHB. And I'm here tonight to go over the fiscal impact analysis that was conducted for the project. I'm not going to go through the entire study, but I am going to go through and highlight some key points. I also want to note that we've submitted a study. It is online. It is available for you to review. We've already received some comments, and as we receive more comments, questions, things that need to be clarified, we will ultimately revise and resubmit a final report. So what's been submitted is in draft form, and we look for your comments or questions. I have about 7 slides or so to highlight some of the key information. So the demographic and fiscal impact analysis study was submitted on December 27th. So it hasn't been out there that long. It is available online. The study was informed by standard fiscal impact multipliers and assumptions. This is standard industry methodology for determining the fiscal costs and benefits of a development project. So the purpose was to look at what this project and the residents of this, future residents of this site would ultimately cost the town and the different taxing jurisdictions, and what type of revenues would be generated, and ultimately to determine if the revenues that would be generated would offset the cost or cover the cost, or what that kind of net cost or benefit might be. All projections and assumptions for the project within the study were based on present-day data and trends due to the uncertainty of predicting future conditions. Project build-out is 2027, 2028, but of course, the numbers that we're using are based on today. They would be obviously higher going 3 years out. Only bona fide sources were used for informing the study. Some of the information that was used include the 2023-24 Town of Simsbury municipal budget, including 2023-2024 mill rates. We also used the 2020 Simsbury Parks and Open Space Master Plan. The 23-24 Simsbury Public School District budget was used. We also used the 2023 Simsbury Public School District enrollment report. And we used U.S. Census Bureau data from the decennial census and the American Community Survey. And we used consumer expenditure survey data via Esri Business Analyst, which is a proprietary data source. All tax revenue projections for the ridge at Talcott Mountain South were based on tax assessment and recent property appraisal of its counterpart, the ridge at Talcott Mountain North. And they were adjusted based on differences in unit size and mix. So the ridge at Talcott Mountain North includes 580 residential units, including 58 affordable units. 29 would be deed restricted to folks with incomes at 80% AMI or less, and 29 units would be deed restricted to families with incomes at 60% AMI or less. The project would feature a mix of 68 single-family homes, 12 duplexes, 4 3-story buildings, apartment buildings, and 8 4-story apartment buildings. All units would be rental. In addition, the project includes a community building, resident community space, as well as 5 acres of land at the front and a multi-use trail. The 2 tables that are on the right side of the screen that you're looking at indicate the population. This is existing population within Simsbury. We have 24,500 residents within the town, and the number of households, there's 9,110 households within the town. So that's the baseline, what you have today, and what we used as our baseline in looking at the increase for population and increase for households. The table at the bottom of the slide that you're looking at indicates how the units are going to be distributed. There's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. There will be 216 one-bedroom units, 296 two-bedroom units, 32 three-bedroom units, and 36 four-bedroom units. So you can see the majority of the units are smaller units, 1 and 2 bedrooms. This is important because when we look at the population that's going to be generated, the number of school children that's going to be generated, taxes that will be paid, all of this is dependent on the size of a unit. Obviously, the larger units will generate more population, more school children, and the tax rate and mill rates, are going to be reflected therein. The very corner of the slide indicates what the rents will be for the projected rents for these units. One bedrooms will be starting over $1,600 a month. Again, this is not for the affordable units, but for the market rate. The 2 bedrooms will rent for $2,100. The 2-bedroom duplex units would start at $3,500, and single-family units, which are your 3 and 4 bedroom, would be $5,000 and greater per month in rent. Okay, so when we look at the residents to be generated by the project, in other words, folks that are going to, the number of people that are going to live on the site, the 580 units would generate between 1,100 and 1,159 new residents. Looking at the age distribution of the residents, between 30 and 33% of the residents will be either under 18 or over 65 years of age. Among those residents, it's estimated that between 96 and 115 public school students would be generated and enrolled in Simsbury Public Schools. We estimate that between 27 and 29% of those students would be enrolled in K through 2. The tables on the right-hand side of the screen that you're looking at indicate where we got how the population would be distributed. So we have a range, as I said. We would have specifically for school children, I think that's the most important. But, we have a range because we looked at highs and lows. We used CUPR, which is the Center for Urban Policy Research at Rutgers University, to determine what the population would be and how that breaks down the age cohorts. And because we've got 2 bedrooms, there are different multipliers that are available, and we wanted to provide the full range, the low and the high. The high number being the worst case scenario. And when we do these studies, we always want to illustrate to you, the municipality, what the worst case scenario would be. In other words, what the greatest potential impact would be, and the greatest potential cost would be. So again, between 1,100 and 1,159 new residents, and between 96 and 115 public school students. I also want to say, with regard to the public school students, there were a number of different ways that we came to these numbers. The school district, the Simsbury School District, indicated that they expect over 100 students from this project. And that number did pan out when we compared the numbers that we got from CUPR. In addition, we looked at the number of students that are actually at Talcott Mountain North. Same developer, similar project. We obviously had to offset for the unit mix, but there are 51 students at Talcott Mountain North with 299 residential units, which would provide, if, pro rata share would be 100 students from the 580 units that are proposed at Talcott Mountain South. So that being said, again, the CUPR numbers give us a broader range, as high as 115. 115 is probably your worst case scenario, but it's worth looking at. Okay, so the 1,100 to 1,160 new residents, it's also very important to remember that not all of these may be new residents living in the town of Simsbury. Many of these may be people who are already living here that are looking to rent someplace new. They may be young adults that are moving out of their parents' home. So these may not be, it may not be a net increase of up to 1,160 new residents. The enrollment of between 96 and 115 additional public school students would represent about 2.8% increase in current school district enrollment. This enrollment level would still be well below the school district's peak enrollment, which was in 2005. The development of the 580 new renter units would increase the town's overall occupied housing units by 6.3%, and the share of renter-occupied units would go from 22% of all occupied units to nearly 27% of all occupied units. So the projection of overall residents, oops, sorry, I went in the wrong direction. Okay. So we also wanted to take a look at what these new, 1,100 to 1,160-ish units, residents would do to spending locally. So we took a look at corresponding Simsbury industries and the projected annual household expenditures within those industries. So here you have, this would be on an annual basis. It's estimated that spending from the new households would be, for example, for furniture and home furnishings, would be $548,000 annually on average. Electronics and appliances, $160,000. The big number there, as you can see, is food and beverage. Food and beverages and also food services, in other words, everything from grocery shopping to sit-down restaurants, takeout, fast food, that type of thing. All told would be about $5.6 million annually in household spending from the new residents. And the other big numbers there, clothing and clothing accessories, about almost $1.2 million annually in spending from these new households, and arts and entertainment and recreation, about $2.1 million in annual spending. It's assumed that the majority of this, or much of this, could be captured within Simsbury. We do have listed here the number of businesses within Simsbury that fall within these classifications. Some spending may not be within Simsbury, it may be in the surrounding areas, but ultimately this is some of the figures that can be generated locally and supporting local businesses. So now we look at the projections on the municipality and on the taxing jurisdictions. So overall, looking at the taxes to be generated, in other words, the property taxes that this development will pay once it's developed, we're looking at a total of between $2.9 and $3.2 million annually. Again, that's in today's dollars. Of that, between $94,000 and $104,000 would be for the fire district, and the remainder between $2.897 million and $3.2 million would be the other taxing jurisdictions for the municipality. In addition, between $148,000 and $492,000, I know that's a big range, but this is the only way to do it, would be raised from property taxes on residents' motor vehicles. And as you know, those annual fees vary based on the weight of a car and all that. So that's why the number is so big. But there would be additional taxes that would be generated to the town based on that additional property tax. It's also estimated that there would be building permit fees. We're not really clear on that number yet. We're going to fine tune that and sharpen our pencil. It may actually be higher than that, but that will be another source of revenues that will be generated from the project. The table on the right-hand side, this comes from your municipal budget for 2023-2024. And we have each of the major budget items. We didn't list every one of them. We consolidated some of them, but the major ones that I think are most of focus and where potentially there could be an impact that we want to look at are listed here. School district, first one on the list, we have the total expenditures, and then we note that it is, school budget is 67% of your total taxes. And we indicate in the far right-hand column the distribution of estimated real property taxes from this project. Now, this doesn't say what it will cost. That's on another slide. But this does say the taxes that would be generated to those taxing jurisdictions from the project. So all told, we had the $2.9 to $3.3 million. And we had the different districts that would receive those taxes the way it's allocated right now based on your current budget. So this is the slide where we look at the impacts. We looked at 7 major areas: police, fire, ambulance, social services, public works, open space recreation, and school district. And we looked at what the current capacity is, in other words, what is being served right now, what the rate of service provisions are, and we looked at what the impact from this project might be based on population and demand, likely calls for service, based on current rates for calls for service. So, for example, for the police department, currently you have about 1.7 police officers per 1,000 residents. That's the level of service that is provided right now. Based on the additional population, there is the potential additional need for 1 to 2 police officers to maintain the current capacity of 1.7 police officers per 1,000 residents. We believe that the projected property taxes as allocated to the police department would offset the additional expense for 1 to 2 police officers. And the numbers are there at the bottom of that column under police to kind of indicate that between the projected revenues are between $156,000 and $173,000, and the cost for those additional 1 to 2 police officers would be $154,000 to $155,000. So again, the additional property taxes to be generated would offset the cost for those additional 1 to 2 police officers. Fire, a similar scenario. There would be revenues generated to the fire district. It is volunteer. There is a likely or potential for an additional 33.5 incidents per year based on the current rate of calls for police response. The additional 1,100 residents could provide an additional pool or source for volunteers. So that's something to keep in mind. Ambulance, typically ambulance is funded through either donations or private billing, either insurance or private pay. It is estimated that there would be, the project could result in 1.37 additional calls each week. But again, there's an additional potential pool of residents that could be volunteers for ambulance, and most of that would be paid through the donations and private billing. Social services, we really focused in on dial-a-ride. There are a lot of different social services that we could have looked at, and there are different revenue sources for different services. There is funding that would be allocated to dial-a-ride programs, $170,000 total budget. There's likely to be between 10 and 14 new rides based on the new population. Public works, again, most of the traffic to be generated is not going to be on local roads. On-site roads would be maintained by the developer and privately maintained for snow and that type of maintenance. It is estimated that $217,500 would be generated in new revenue via sewer use fees. For open space and recreation, the project may deepen the pre-existing need identified by the town for additional park maintenance workers. One additional park maintenance worker would add an additional $53,000 in annual salary expense. The project will have some on-site, a clubhouse and some on-site recreation for project residents, but that may offset the need for public recreation. And school district, as we mentioned before, the estimated tax revenue to the school district is projected to be between $1.9 and $2.1 million. The estimated student expenditures are between $1.1 and $1.4 million. We do see, even in a worst-case scenario, a net benefit to the school district. Again, we wanted to look at this full range to allow for the full range, including that worst-case scenario, as high as 115 students to the public school district, and also to look at the range of taxes to potentially be generated to ensure that this would be basically paying for what it would cost the school district. A lot more detail is provided in the report, which is available online. Again, the report will be finalized based on comments and questions. I'm not sure if there are any questions now that I can clarify from the board. Otherwise, I'll step out of the way and let others ask specific questions.
Well, could you just first go back to, it's available online? Where exactly do people have to go to see it online?
I'm going to defer to George on that.
Mr. Chairman, the study's posted with all the application materials.
Oh, okay.
This agenda,
Okay.
this agenda on this date.
All right.
And again, that is a draft, so we're here to get your comments, your questions, if there are things that need to be clarified. This was really just an overview. There's a lot more information in the report. So upon your review, if you have comments, questions, things that are not clear that we need to clarify or edit, we'll go ahead and we'll make those changes and issue a final report.
Well, let's just go back to the question of, do commission members have questions they'd like to ask related really to clarification of the information that was presented and not, the merits of the proposal?
I have a quick question. I don't know if you can address it now, but maybe you can add it to your report. In talking with some people, our waste treatment plant is kind of, I don't know if there's much room for expansion, and I know it serves both Simsbury and Granby. I know Granby's doing a great deal of building, and now we're doing all this additional. I just wonder if you've explored whether that would be a conflict or an issue for us with this additional buildings.
I can't answer it now, but we
I figured
can,
as much. So
definitely.
if you could.
Thank you.
Jackie, you look like you have a question. No? Okay.
Quick
David.
question. You've indicated that the expectation of new students would be between 96 and 115.
Yes.
We have from the school superintendent's office, actually from the assistant superintendent, an expectation that the additional students would actually be between 100 to 130. How would that impact the cost per pupil and the overall cost to the school?
So I hadn't seen the 100 to 130. I had heard the 100, which is consistent with Talcott Mountain North. The numbers that we used are kind of standard multipliers for Connecticut. Those are not kind of national. They are Rutgers University Center for Urban Policy Research does do generation rates by state. So they're specific to Connecticut. And it is a broad range, 96 to 115. We didn't run the numbers for up to 130. And I'm not, so I can't off the top of my head tell you whether that would be covered. The methodology we used for impacts to the school district is fairly standard. We looked at the portion of the school taxes that are paid for towards education. There were 3 different components to your school district budget. We looked at the component of the education budget, and then the portion of your overall taxes, obviously, which go to the school district, and we allocated from there per student what those costs would be. Again, and the taxes to be generated, we used the most conservative estimate of the taxes to be generated by the development, based on Talcott North and a recent appraisal that's been done. So there are a lot of things that could change that, but that's something that we can look at.
And how old is the Rutgers methodology?
So the methodology is updated. It's the methodology itself is old, but then we update it based on, it's done based on the unit sizes. So these are specific generation rates, not for all units, but for specific unit sizes. And we do it based on today's cost. So whether you're purchasing or renting, because the numbers are different for the number of students to be generated. And then we look at the actual cost range of costs. So there are a lot of things that go into getting very accurate generation rates. So we did today's dollars based on the rents that are projected, which we discussed. And the unit mix that was discussed. You know, if that unit mix changes as the, you know, site plan is fine-tuned, there would be adjustments as well.
Thank you.
I have a quick clarification, actually, on the slide where you showed social services. I just wanted to clarify the piece about dial-a-ride, estimated maximum of 10 to 14 new riders generated from this building. Okay. Did you look at any other social services programs besides dial-a-ride?
So we looked at the overall budget. We didn't look at specific programs. So we didn't look at other specific programs, but we did look at the overall budget for social services. So total budget and then total kind of per capita costs, where they are now, where they would be based on the new residents. We also have age distribution in the projected resident population. So we have an idea how many would be seniors, how many would be under 18. I think that was in one of the slides with the kind of age cohorts. So we can take a better look, a closer look at some other programs, but right now, all we did was total social services budget.
Yeah, I would be curious to get some more feedback on additional programs. And I say this only from the perspective of, I serve on the Aging and Disability Commission, and transportation overall is an issue. So I just have some concerns.
Was there anything else from the board? Otherwise, I'll step down and let
I just wanted to
folks.
clarify one point. When you
Yes.
say 58 units are going to be set aside as affordable housing, that's just apartments, correct? That doesn't include duplexes and houses?
It includes, I believe it includes apartments, but
Just
58 of the total. So we have 580 units, 10% or 58 units would be set aside for affordable. It's my understanding those would be distributed among the apartment units.
Right.
Now,
No
those
duplexes or
would be
houses.
one bedrooms, two bedrooms.
Okay. Wanted to clarify that point.
But
Thank
it,
you.
it doesn't include the duplexes or the freestanding homes.
I'm not sure, and I'm going to defer
Oh, that's a
to
question that
to the
I thought
developer.
was raised.
Referring to
Okay.
page 29, I think that's what
Okay.
you're saying on page 29 of your report, that is just apartments. It's just all 58 units of apartments.
Thank you, Gina.
No houses.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just answer that quick comment by Mr. Braz.
Oh, he's gonna answer you.
So the 10% is of the total number of units, which is 58. But those units would be in the apartments. So it's 10% total, but concentrated in the apartments.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, like I mentioned before,
Well, just another moment
Sure.
on that. I'm interested in a little bit further on what does the 10% reflect? I mean, why not 12 or 6 or 50? I
do you
don't
mind
know.
if I get to that later in the presentation?
Sure.
I was going to address that.
Okay.
So there's only about 3 or 4 things that I want to touch on. That's one of them at the end. So this will just take 5 or 10 minutes maybe. Actually, I'm going to go back on the slides. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is we listened to the public comment last time, obviously, and like I said, I wanted to kind of generalize some of the comments and try to answer some of the ones that were kind of overarching. One thing I wanted to note first of all was there was comments made about the construction at the north being completed before construction at the south started. So one thing we want to point out is that there is a new tenant for that last retail building that's under construction right now. And that's something that I know there's new members on the board, but some of you were involved in that approval. So that building, which I'm sure everyone's aware of, I'll point it out in a second. This building here is basically being leased out to the Goddard Schools, which is a daycare, and they're going to take the entire building. And they are looking to be operational in September of 2024, which means that that building and the fit out for that will be complete by then. And at that same time, the remaining items that are to be completed is on the south side of the project. There needs final pavement, final top course on that, and some final landscaping. So all that would be done by that time. And you know, if the south advances, if we get approved and we advance, we would not begin construction before that September date. So the north would be complete by that time. So that's something I wanted to point out. The second thing I want to point out was this slide. So basically, you know, I felt like we concentrated on the south, and I know there were some questions about visibility and proximity to the road, and we felt that having this slide where we show the north and south together was really kind of telling. And what you're seeing here, obviously, it kind of tells that story about the proximity of these buildings at the north versus what we're doing at the south. And I just want to focus on the north for a second. So when you look at the north, our buildings are parallel to the road, so they basically take up more massing as you're looking towards the site. Also, the retail buildings, which are here and here, are approximately 130 feet to the road. So we have a 100-foot landscape buffer, and those buildings are right at the edge of that, so they're about 130 feet off that. The assisted living building, which is the building to the north, and the two apartments here are approximately 280 feet to the street line. So I just want you to keep that in mind for a moment. And the reason that was done is actually I was glad that Mr. McGregor read through those comments earlier on, because obviously we do need you to basically comment on those because they're the changes that we're requesting. But I couldn't help but note as I read through, or as I was listening to that at least a couple of them, the block perimeter, the percentage of building facing the road. If you listen to the way that those comments are written, they're written for density. And that's why we did this at the north. We needed to have a certain percentage of building always facing the road. It had to be that 65%. So that the code is written to have a lot of building massing up against the road. The 2,000 block perimeter is the same thing. It's basically saying you can't have within a 2,000 foot block, you have to have a certain amount of building that occupies that space. And actually what we're asking for on the south, believe it or not, is to actually reduce that. Is to have that block perimeter be separated by open space, is to not have 65% open, or to just basically meet that. Because you can see at the south, our buildings are perpendicular to the road, right? So that also opens up view corridors into the site, as opposed to the north when you're looking and you are looking at the building face. And that was the intent of that. But the south is drastically different for that reason. It's also different that instead of the 100-foot landscape setback, we actually are proposing a 150-foot minimum. We're actually closer to 200, but we put it in as a 150-foot requirement. So like this corner of the parking lot, I think gets like 190, and the rest of it's around 200. Now, when you look at the proximity of these buildings to the road, you're actually over 300 feet. You're anywhere from 300 to 340 feet. So you're 60 feet at minimum. And when I say that, I'm really picking on this corner. If you weren't looking at this corner, you'd be up at 380 feet. So you're over 100 feet further back than you are in the north. And once again, being oriented perpendicular to Hot Meadow does give a different perspective as you drive by. So that's something that I wanted to point out. We felt was kind of a reoccurring theme in some of the comments the last time.
Now, did you have some sort of a theme or, within your design team, some notion of the purpose? Like, why is the building back 300 feet from the road? I mean,
There were a lot
and
of.
not 400
Sure.
800,
Mhm.
When you stand back and look towards the mountain
Yes, sir. Yep.
from
So
the
basically,
roadway or from the sidewalk. you know, you get different sort of views of it, and I'm just curious as to how you arrive at those setbacks.
Sure, so obviously that's, you know, I can't answer that in great detail, because
Okay.
we'd be here forever, but I do want to answer that. You know, obviously this isn't the first concept that we didn't come right out of the gates with this concept and come right to you, right? So, we factored in a lot of things. We did look at the form-based code, and we looked at what we felt was important to folks when we were here for the north, such as that landscape buffer, right? So that's where we said, you know, do we come in with 100 feet? No, we want to push it back. So that's what we did. We also have some constraints. We have, obviously wetland constraints. We considered the view shed very carefully. That's why we did those renderings that show those images. So in placing those buildings, where they're located, because we felt provided the best views. We also had to contend with some logistical issues. There is the main sewer line for the town, runs right through the site, and it's not in a straight line. So we're actually avoiding it right here. So that basically set our northern boundary here is the sewer line. So between the sewer line, the setback in the front, that kind of gave us this half of the site. And then when you look, our overarching theme, our main objective was to stay within the limits of existing disturbance. And that's what you would see in this. I'm just gonna flip to the next slide for a second. I know you've seen this before, but this is the overlay that shows that on the existing footprint. That was, I would say, you mentioned the word theme. That was our number one kind of thing, is don't extend beyond the existing limits of disturbance. But then hopefully with some of the other items I just mentioned, I kind of maybe didn't completely answer your question, but hopefully gave you some insight as to some of our thought process is how we got to this point. So now keeping on that theme, someone on the commission at the very end, I know we spent more time on the public comments, but someone, I believe it was you, Mr. Chairman, had asked us with a parting question of why 580 units. And I believe that's kind of what you're asking now. And you know, that kind of bounced around in my head for the last 2 weeks. It really did, because we were trying to understand how best to answer that, because we came to, the evolution of our concepts came to that 580 units. And I think it is important for everyone to understand how we got there. So, like I said, we considered things like the form-based code, which I said kind of asked for a certain density. And when Mr. McGregor read those changes, we worked very hard to minimize the changes that we had. You know, we got it down to like 10. We started out at 20 or whatever, and we really worked it down to that short list. You know, we considered the POCD, we considered traffic and sewer capacity. And you know, along those themes, we also wanted a mix of product type. We didn't want to just have apartments, but we also wanted to introduce the single-family homes. We thought this would be a unique touch here. So we have three components. We have the apartments, we have the townhouses, and the single-family homes. And our thought was also to go, as the form-based code suggests, to go from dense to less dense. So we wanted the single-family homes to have this separation, be buffered out here in the back, have the views, the natural setting, the more quiet setting. The same on the south side. We know we have neighbors to the south, so we wanted to go with our least intrusive, our least dense use there, right? We didn't want to put an apartment building here. We wanted to go to the single family homes where it's backyard abutting those neighbors to the south. So these are all kind of the thoughts that we had. You know, now when you just look at this from a capacity standpoint, like for example, sewer and traffic, like we talked about what the road system could handle. If you equated the sewer capacity to this site, we could have 3 times the number of units that we're showing here. That's how much sewer we're allowed on this site. When you look at traffic, we're allowed to have over 1,000 cars, 1,000 units that would result in the same traffic. So we didn't start at our maximum, what could this site handle? That number would be well over 1,000 units based on looking at sewer and traffic. We looked at all the items I talked about. We looked at the different components that we wanted to share, and that's how we came to the 580 units. So I wasn't really intending to explain it in that way, but that was our thought process through the design. That's how we got to this plan.
Is there a reason why you don't have like less units and more mixed use? Like there's no mixed use in this development, it's fully residential. whereas you could make money from having some commercial properties there and less units, so it would be maybe more positively impactful on the community?
So that's a very important comment. It's a very important discussion to have. And when you look at those 10 changes that, I'm gonna get to your question in a second. When you look at those 10 changes that we made in the code, I would think the biggest one was number 1, and it was basically related to that. It's about what are we transitioning from, right? So that is the elephant in the room when it comes to like our code change. We always felt that was our number 1 code change. The reason for not having that is really the way the market has been. Silverman has owned this property. It's been active now for 3 or 4 years, and they've gauged the amount of interest that they've seen for those 2 residential buildings. Obviously, the retail buildings. The retail building here obviously is completely built out and it's completely vacant. I'm not gonna talk about what kind of interest they've had in it, but obviously it's been low. They're very excited to introduce the Goddard School to this building, which was initially, looked at also as a retail and, kind of daycare kind of fits that mixed use. But, they would love to have a retail component if they felt it would make them money, if they felt they could market that. So it really has been their market experience here with the North that has led us to not come in here with retail or a mixed use.
Can I just add to that, because, and then I don't know if we wanna take a couple of comments, so I'm sorry, I don't wanna take too long on this, but, you've been talking about how you've been trying to follow the form-based code, obviously, so I just pulled it up real quickly, and I know George had shared it with us earlier, but it's very clear that the intention is to encourage the reuse of the South Hartford site, building for office, technology, healthcare, support services, while preserving where feasible. I mean, it's very clear that that's what it was intended for. That we wanted to have mixed, and while I appreciate, I've been here, and I know you guys have had a really hard time, getting commercial into those buildings. We've got a lot of businesses coming into town in other places. So I don't know if it's that there are not businesses, but maybe they're not interested in your site for some reason. But I mean, I thought the idea behind this whole development was to have mixed use so that people could walk and get their coffee and they don't have to be driving everywhere. And they can go to their doctor's offices and all that can be in that one site. And so while I appreciate what you're saying, I do think that maybe that's something we really do need to focus on more and getting some commercial in there.
And that's a discussion for this commission to have. I'm not gonna disagree with you. I do wanna clarify a couple things, and I don't wanna misspeak, so please don't quote me on this, but the form-based code that you're looking at, I believe the South has like 6 components. I might get these numbers wrong. I believe it's 6 components. And I believe we're allowed to pick 2 of them, I believe, something like that. So while I'm not disagreeing that a commercial is one of them, it wouldn't be all the uses you mentioned, like all in one, right? It wouldn't be the technology park and this or that. So, and that is where we're looking at, while it is all one residential use, we acknowledge that. We want to balance that by having the different types of product type. But the comments that both of you made are obviously for this commission to discuss.
Well,
Thank you.
I can't resist. I mean, here's the thing. There's an appendix in that regulation, and it has a list of north of 400 uses for that property. The first one on the first line is residential, single-family, multifamily. The rest of the 400 don't speak to residential. They speak to all vision of commercial activity. And that doesn't include the fact that that property is forever still developable under the industrial category that it has always been zoned as. So you're developing under the overlay zone that was adopted and has been in place since 2014, but the industrial zone is still there and still usable. I'm not saying it's
I'm not
better.
going to opine to that, but I think that
Well, it's
there
for
might be
a
disagreement
developer
there.
to tell us what they think
Yeah.
they can do and
Right.
what they're interested in doing. It matters little what's there, other than the fact that you've selected what you want to do, and we'll consider it. It's your application, and you know that.
Yep, no,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Yep.
Okay,
So basically, that was all I really wanted to clarify from last time, so really,
Thank you.
we're going to leave it back to you folks.
well, I appreciate your effort to get the team back and to
Yes, of
provide
course.
more information for us. And now, we're going to move on to the public input, and I wish I had a better microphone here, but what I'd like to do is we're going to use the same format we used 2 weeks ago, which is sort of a informal organizing of this process, but we want everybody who's here tonight who wants to speak to have an opportunity to do that. And what that means is we need to ask people to, use their own judgment, but try to be concise in your comments and try not to reiterate or repeat things other people have said. But with that said, really, the only other guideline on what's allowable in terms of comments is you need to stick to the notice, the legal notice for this meeting, which really means your comments have to be related to this proposal, application 2338. It's for the development on the property at the address of 200 Hot Meadow Street, and it's this thing. So you might have other concerns about life in Simsbury, but we're here to talk about this. So what I'd like to do is just, slowly, if we have one person speaking, we can easily have like the next two people standing to the side, and somebody can slip right in there as quickly as, we can move along. But it's important if you feel like you've taken a lot of time, you could sit down and come back at the end, or come back 2 weeks with the next meeting. But in any case, assuming the meeting goes on 2 weeks, but we want to hear what people have to say. We're interested. So if you'd like to start, I need everybody to give their name and their address for the recording. So if you would start with that, please.
Thank you. My name is Pat Weisbrick, 3 Lenora Drive in West Simsbury. There's been a lot of new information, so some of this that I wrote down I've crossed off. But first I want to take a moment to thank you all for your service. It's a very, very important job. And I'm sure I don't have to remind you that the decisions that you make will have an impact on the town for a long time. And one of the primary reasons we're here tonight is because of the impact of decisions made by boards and select boards a decade ago. So I don't want to reiterate comments made at the previous meeting, but there were all sorts of highlights of traffic and schools and recreation and public service, social services and all that. And the out-of-state developer potential of promises made and promises broken. I think that the narrative for housing and affordability has really been changed to a formula. And I just want to highlight that in the past, when I grew up, the working class, the moderate, middle-income people there were such things as starter homes. And there were starter homes that were small and on very small pieces of property. But they were owned. They were not rented. You'll be getting some pictures and stuff of the houses that I lived in West Hartford, all of them between 1,000 square feet and 1,300 square feet. Families raised, families that have stayed in town, committed to the community, contributing to the community over the decade. You don't get that in a rental market. I do think that Simsbury needs to reconsider what affordability really means. Is it high-rise apartment buildings? Is it 2,300 to 2,900 square foot rental houses? I mean, with the rents, I must say I get sticker shock looking at those rents, that it becomes impossible to put down a down payment because you can't save fast enough at those rates if you're renting. So it's, I think, important to note something that just crossed my radar screen. A California developer in the area escalated rent in one case from $950 a month to $1,500 a month last year. That's a pretty big increase. And apparently no provisions exist to prevent unchecked escalation. And I also note that the rental income is flowing out of our community to out-of-state developers. So I believe the aforementioned model of small homes on small lots is a proven success for stabilizing a community, contributing to a community, making a community grow. So I'm asking you, please, please, don't sell out our beautiful community for the revenues projected that they're the projected revenues to be generated. And on another note, it might be nice to have some sort of a retrospective study of projections made and what actually happened. I have no idea what the numbers look like, but they're always rosy, and in the they put everything in a positive light. Anyway, I hope that you will consider all that, and once again, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. I'd like to give you some background on the Silverman Group. I'd like to read some of my comments that I made to the Board of Selectmen meeting on March 14th, 2016. Quote, I'm very concerned with the agenda item, appointment of legal counsel land use commission or development associated with 200 Hop Meadows Street, the Hartford Financial Development. It appears that Simsbury's town attorney, Bob DiCrescenzo from Updike Kelly and Spellacy, is acting as a rainmaker for his legal office. As town attorney, it appears that he has created conflicts with this present development. The Silverman Group and the Ethel Walker School both hired Updike Kelly and Spellacy for legal counsel, placing our town attorney in conflict. As the rainmaker for Updike Kelly and Spellacy, Bob DiCrescenzo placed the town in conflict, causing the taxpayers to pay $275 an hour for Michael Ziska from Mertha Kalina for legal work with the Silverman Group, who purchased the Hartford, and we paid the legal counsel during the land use acquisition. From Ethel Walker, the Ethel Walker School, to Chip Houlihan. We had to pay him for extra counsel. Why did the town allow town attorney accept this apparent conflict? Either Bob DiCrescenzo is working in the best interest of the town, or he is working as the main rainmaker for Updike Kelly and Spellacy. He cannot have it both ways. Fast forward 2024. Town attorney has once again a conflict with the Silverman Group, 200 Hop Meadows Street. As town attorney DiCrescenzo based his opinions on the best interest of the town or the Silverman Group and 200 Hop Meadows Street. As a result of these long-standing conflicts and alleged unethical conduct, town attorney DiCrescenzo should no longer be approved as town attorney. The Silverman Group has hired town attorney DiCrescenzo to represent them while DiCrescenzo was contracted as a town attorney for Simsbury. Therefore, all expenses associated with these long-term conflicts, hiring outside counsel created by the Silverman Group, should be paid by the Silverman Group, not the taxpayers of Simsbury.
Joan, maybe you could just
The
jump
Silverman
to your
Group
next
submitted
topic,
an
because
impact study for the
DiCrescenzo's
student
not
population.
involved in this
This has
matter.
to do with the thing. The Silverman Group recently submitted the impact study for the student population with additional 580 units. There are more impact studies that should be initiated. The original land at 200 Hop Meadow Street was farmland. As we have learned over the years, chemicals used in farmland pollutes the land and water and should be investigated. There should be a study on the chemicals used specific to the farmland. This should require an environmental impact study. All the water supplied to the town comes from aquifers. All the additional units are supplied by a single pump station. There should be an impact study on the water use and whether the additional water usage can be delivered by the present aquifers. The wells should be tested for the chemicals used on the land for the safety of water consumption. There should be a list of chemicals used on the property for maintenance of plantings supplied to the town. Irrigation systems require a large quantity of water. The amount of water capacity for the development should be approved by the Aquarian Water Company. The additional increase in student population cannot be absorbed in a single neighborhood school, Latimer Lane. The impact on the student population in a local area will lead to redistricting to accommodate the impact. This will add an additional cost for a redistricting study and implementation. There are too many unknowns until all impact studies are finalized. Therefore, this development should not be approved as presented, and all of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch and Twitter at Joan Co. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Tim Payne. I'm at 35 Cooper Avenue, which is in the north section of this development. Thank you guys for your presentation. It was really thoughtful, really thorough, as it was the last time I was here. I do have a couple of things to point out. One is I would like to get the rent that you plan on charging for your 2-bedroom because it's 40% less than I'm paying right now. It's hard to believe that in 3 years that the rents will go down by 40%, but that would be awesome if it does. The second thing is I'm glad to hear that the paving will be done only 3 years after I move into the apartment. I'm glad to hear that the landscaping will be done 3 years after I move into the apartment. I want to reiterate only two things, and I'll be very brief. One is that the impact of these buildings is more than just the number of people, the number of dollars. It's also the quality of the construction, the visual impact from the people that live there, the visual impact from the road. And I would encourage all of you commissioners to take a walk or drive through the North Development and get a feel for it. See what it feels like when you go through. I've enjoyed living there. I've enjoyed living in an apartment, but I have real concerns about the quality of the construction, about the density and the width of the roads, the safety, the sight lines. And I would encourage you all to go through yourself and just get your own perspective on it. I appreciate the depth of research that the developer has presented, and I have no issue with the numbers. I'm not a numbers person. I don't know the details, but I think that numbers can be interpreted in a number of different ways. One of the numbers I want to say is, and I may have misheard, are you the attorney? I may have misheard you, but I thought you said in the North Development that it was 130 feet from the road to the commercial property, I think. And yet I thought you said it was 300 feet from the road to the south, the buildings on the south side. And if I misheard that, I apologize. But I'm looking at that picture, trying to see how on the south it's 3 times the distance from the road to the buildings, and I just don't see it. But I would just encourage you all to look at the details of this, and as the previous speaker said, know that whatever decision you make is permanent. It's not going to change. Thank you very much for your time, for your volunteering service, and thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I'll just say a few words. Marcia Frankel, 1 West Street. I first moved to Simsbury in 1969 in a small, affordable house because I couldn't afford West Hartford or any other town, so I came over the mountain. For the past 30 to 40 years, we've been out of town because life took over, and when we retired, we wanted to come back to a town that we loved. And we were so surprised at how, despite the growth, the character of the town remained. And I thank everybody on all the boards for doing that. Despite the growth, downtown is downtown and it's homey. So I think with all the talk about money and what development could bring, think about what development can take away. And that's the character of this town, which you won't get back.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Phil Rittner. I live at 313 Hop Meadow Street. I didn't have any plan for what I was going to say, so I apologize if I ramble. But I would first say that I would much prefer a residential development, half a mile from my front door than I would a commercial development. But to go off what one of the last speakers said, we have to take into consideration the quality of life, the quality of the neighborhood. I haven't heard anybody talk about what it will be like to live near this thing. We talked about what it'll be like to live in it, or what it'll do for the town, what it'll do for but one of the reasons I moved here was, and this is gonna sound silly, but because I could look at the mountain. I've lived in Manhattan, I've lived in New Britain, I've lived in Southington. I don't think you want Route 10 in Simsbury to look like Route 10 in Southington. It's little New Jersey. I moved here so that I could look at that mountain, and I appreciate the difference between the vertical to the street versus the perpendicular to the street. But I and my partner chose to buy a huge and difficult restoration project because we believed from doing our research that this was a town that cared about the quality of life, that this was a town that cared about the image that it put forward, that this was a town that, I heard over and over and over again before we bought our house, oh, it's a gateway to Simsbury, it's a gateway to Simsbury, it's a gateway to Simsbury. We're so happy that somebody's bought it. Well, the gateway to Simsbury pretty soon is gonna be a 7-Eleven and a bunch of condos. And nobody's gonna be able to see the mountain, and we're not gonna be able to see the tower. Right now, in the proposals that they put up there, the tower is floating on the roof of a little apartment building. We can still see it, great, but in what context? Also, I would invite any of you, developers, lawyers, people in town, please come by my house sometime between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., and try to turn left out of my driveway. The reports that you've read about the impact on the traffic don't say anything. All it says is, oh, well, Simsbury's not going to have to pay for it because it's a state road. But you mentioned something like upwards of 3,000 car trips coming in and out of that a day. Already I can't get out of my driveway. I often have to take a right, drive down to the North Development, and turn around so that I can get downtown. If you add another couple thousand car trips a day, what's that gonna do to that? What's that gonna do to my quality of life? And at what point is that sort of development gonna start to encroach to the house next door to it? Or the one beyond that, or the one beyond that? And at what point does this start to affect my property values as a homeowner in town? At what point does it no longer make sense for me to take on the 15-year project that I've taken on because I thought that this was a town that cared? And at what point do I just sell it for a development? Because that seems to be what is going on here, which isn't where I thought I moved. So that's what I have to say.
Hi, my name is Anita Kirshner. I've been in this town since 1972. As you can tell, I have not lost the New York accent. All my kids say, throw the ball, Mom, and I say, throw the ball. So I've been in this town since 1972. I own a condo at Talcott Acres. I bought that condo because I can see that tower from my unit and sit at the back door. I live right now at 7 Browngate Lane. I've been in there for about 30 years, and I have seen a change in this town. I used to ride my horse to Valley Home and Garden and get feed. People were friendly and nice and caring, and they cared about this town. I see a large impact in the development. I do not want a Bradley Airport in Simsbury. When the Hartford moved in, we fought like hell to have certain lighting and the dimmers that were on the lighting. Nobody talked about that. With your pools and your fitness center and your squash courts, or what are they called, pickleball courts, basketball courts, it's residential, but yet it has to be illuminated. And I'm really concerned that this is going to look like an airport. I understand that people have to live and people have to see where they're going, but also with the traffic. The traffic is a major problem in this town on the other side. We don't need any more condos. I am with the small home buyer, small-time buyers. I do understand that you do have to develop something. How are we going to pay for these taxes? We're going to carry the burden. It's not a company that's going to provide some tax relief for us. We're going to be carrying this. Also, too, the water treatment. There's all marshland back there. I don't know what kind of sewer system they're putting in, but there is a spill-off. There's a flange. You know, in any circumstance, there is flanges, the water spill-offs. We don't know what the chemicals are like. I'm just sorry that this town is being developed with not concern for the people that are coming in, and the school system, and the police, and the ambulance. All this adds up, and we're going to be having the cost to burden this. I also want to tell you that this town has the great pro-recreational town. I moved here for my kids. Well, the oldest is now 50. I mean, they're in Boston right now, but anytime they come back, they love Simsbury. Now my grandchildren get to stay. You know, I just don't want another Bradley Airport here. I don't want those lights. No one's talked about that. It is a big problem because those people behind that south side, some of them have been there for like 20, 30 years. I'm an original owner. I have never rented out my condo. I gave it to my son, my mother, you know, but I've never rented it out. I still own it. And I can see that the Hartford really took good care of putting trees. Now, you say you're going to have a 4-story unit. 4-story unit, the Hartford moved out because they couldn't build a 3-story garage. The town wouldn't allow it. So, you know, this is really getting to me that someone can come in and you know, place a 4-story unit. That means your lights have to be even higher. That means your trees, if you're going to do anything that's aesthetically pleasing, should be even higher than those small Christmas trees. I'm really concerned. I don't like the major development, and I do love this town dearly, so I really care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas Sterner, 11 Barnard Drive, Simsbury, 4 minutes. Bruce, Simsbury's town plan of conservation and development was revisited this past year in order to incorporate the results of a town survey of resident views on livability in Simsbury. This was a comprehensive effort to produce a road map for the future that would help maintain and enhance town livability, character, and a sense of place. Not scheduled for revision until 2027, the Planning Commission began the review process 4 years early. What event could have been the cause for this early attention to development and town character, I ask? For my part, and I could be wrong, for my part, I can only point to one event that could have triggered this, and that is the disaster at the south end of town, known as the Ridge at Talcott Mountain North. While the construction of the Big Y at the north end of town has led to a snarl of traffic and traffic problems due to delayed planning by the DOT and the town, The Big Y has aided the livability factor to a helpful degree. The same cannot be said of the Talcott North and South developments completed or proposed. And for the life of me, I cannot see how the South End development could help to maintain and enhance the town's character. It would be a mystery to me. The massive footprint of Talcott North, even now with new boxes appearing on the front lawn, of Soviet-style 4-story apartment buildings, is an affront to one's concept of proportion and of respect for community character. How it will preserve water quality in the Farmington River over time is a big concern, with 584 families and their runoff living adjacent. In the 1980s, the people of Simsbury turned down a proposal by the Connecticut DOT to connect Simsbury to Interstate I-84 via an extension that would have run along the foothills of Talcott Mountain. So resistance to building out the town was strong then, and it is now. That momentous decision and the growth of the town's very active land trust was a character trait of Simsbury, a wish to preserve some of its rural past and a less furious pace of life. When residents appreciate their hometown and you mess with its character, you could be asking for a lot of trouble. As this land use board knows well, a top concern of the new plan of conservation and development and of residents' preferences is preserving and reserving more of Simsbury's sustainable and scenic areas through an open space system encompassing, among others, water quality, Talcott Mountain ridge lines, and the Farmington River corridor. Those important vistas overlook or are adjacent to the massive Silverman projects, one completed and another proposed along Route 10. The two concepts for these areas, preservation on the one hand or overdevelopment on the other, are incompatible. The unbuilt portion, Talcott South, should be left fallow or used for low-impact venues, such as a golf driving range, for example. Even screened-off solar panels benefiting Simsbury's power grid this time would be preferable to the high-density housing complexes in Talcott North and South. We must start with this opportunity that we have here and now to turn things around, and we should disapprove the ridge at Talcott Mountain South. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Hi, Ann McDonald. I live in Hazel Meadow, and thank you for the zoning for sitting, because I know it's got to be a frustrating job to make these decisions. I know the dollar signs must just look great for the town, but I think we're losing our integrity of the town. When I moved here, and I've said this before at other zoning meetings, there was one house I could buy, maybe two, that was affordable for myself and my two children after I got divorced. It would have been nice to have more of a selection, and we lose that here. I would have liked to have seen, I was hoping that this piece of property could have been used for some type of community like I live in Hazel Meadow, which is like a common interest community. Like we have 53 homes, but maybe it could have been 100 homes where you could have bought a house as a starter home. You don't need 2,500 or 3,000 square feet. You don't need to be paying $5,000 a month for rent for a home. You could build houses that are just as little as 1,000 square feet and still raise a family, have ownership, contribute to the town. I don't see the people You have all these studies of how much they're gonna contribute to the town in here. I'm sorry, I'm a mail carrier. I deliver to developments like this. All I deliver are Amazon boxes, Wayfair boxes, food from Walmart, everything. But you're not going to the local hardware store and buying paint for the walls because you don't get to paint those walls. They're already painted for you. You don't go to the hardware store or local hardware store and buy a lawnmower or gasoline for that to mow your lawn. Or you don't go to the flower center, our local flower center, to buy flowers to plant in your yard and make it look beautiful. These people, I don't care what you say or what study that you have done, they don't contribute to our community like a homeowner contributes. And it gives people pride to come in. It gave me pride that I could afford a home. One home, maybe two I could have afforded, and that was stretching it. Luckily, I was lucky. It took me over a year to find a home that I could afford in Simsbury. I wanted to come back here. My children started school here. I wanted them to continue. I wanted them to graduate here. And they did, and I'm glad that they got to do that. But I don't know. I think this property really, we need to look again. I think you guys see the dollar signs, and that's all great. But we'll need to hire more policemen. We'll need to hire or get more volunteers for our fire departments and ambulances. I think this is downhill. I think we're going in the wrong direction with this. I think we just need to keep our focus. Look for the people that can contribute to our community, that can volunteer here. I just don't see a community, and we're just, and we might get about the same amount of kids in the schools. If you build 100 homes, if each home had 1.5 children or 2 children, you'll get 100 children. But I think you'll get people, if you have home ownership, you get, I don't know, I guess there's a certain, I think they contribute to the town more when you own a home and you have invested interest in your community. I think you tend to give back to your community more than just somebody that rents an apartment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, evening. Al Weisbrich, 3 Lenore Drive, West Simsbury. I think you're getting the drift here from people talking about this project. I'm talking about the citizens here. And I think you realize that your responsibility is not to the town government, but to the citizens here. And I think the citizens are speaking quite clearly about this. When you look at a project like this, it's easy to get caught up in the fancy slides, the nice-looking things, and the so-called official studies. And unless you really dig in yourself and study this stuff thoroughly or have it studied for you independently, it's all going to be just you're just going to suck it up like a fish takes on a hook and a worm. What I see here, unfortunately, is what others have already expressed, that this town is what it is because of property owners and home ownership and dedication to the town, not from hundreds and hundreds of new renters that are being, and I just see the big sucking sound of all that money going out of state. And no benefit to the town, really. And the consequence of putting something like this up has already been expressed, that all the additional costs to the town are going to be burdening all the property owners. It's going to be spread over the property owners, not them. If there were at least the case where, any additional services and so on that need to be provided, utilities, whatever, are on the developer itself, not on the property owners. See, that's an easy one for them because they recognize, the rest of the town, property taxes and so on, it's all going to be spread evenly. It's not going to be fair in that sense. It's inequitable because they're getting all the benefit. And as far as it's been expressed before by others as well, the town needs people that are dedicated to the town. And that's done by ownership. And this property, I know, wants to be developed on the town's part, but the way to go is, again, ownership. small startup homes. Same thing, they could take over on that basis and say, make the decision. We'll put in small starter homes that people can afford. And the thing would go. Otherwise, I would highly recommend to turn this project down the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
People behind you might need to be a little more.
Okay, I know I have a small,
Here you
I was worried that the mic was gonna be an issue. My name is Corinne Jarnella. I live at 1 Simscroft Place. And I have been a Simsbury resident for the past 24 years. I chose to purchase my first home in Simsbury on the chance that I would one day end up having a family. I had one child who is now 18 years old who graduated from Simsbury High back in June. At various times when he was growing up, I would tell him how lucky he was to be living in one of the best towns a child can grow up in and getting one of the best public school educations that a child can receive. I think this is the issue I got put my readers on. I believe that Simsbury has been not only one of the best towns to live in within the state of Connecticut, but in the entire country. This town has always been a beautiful combination of country scenery, active community, a variety of things to do both in town and close by, and has provided a sense of safety and peace. People in the surrounding areas are talking, and not in a good way, about the development that continues to happen here. Growth and positive change is important, and there has been a lot of positive change over the years. But there needs to be a balance, and I ask that you take into consideration not just what is being developed in this town, but what is happening at our doorstep all around us, right over the line in Granby, Canton, Avon, Bloomfield, and Windsor. It's all having an impact. At the last meeting on December 18th, many of us learned towards the end of the meeting, for those who had not yet read the proposal, that the 68 individual homes that they want to build will be for rent at $5,000 a month, which has been mentioned. This shows us that these out-of-state developers are not interested in building the much-needed homes for people to purchase to own, build equity in, and put down roots here. Their interest is in collecting rent of over $4 million a year for these homes unending. Regarding the school system, I just wanted to share that I recently had a conversation with some acquaintances that do not live in town, and the subject came up about what was going on with all of this, and I mentioned the potential impact on the school system as a concern. And someone said to me, "Didn't your son just graduate? It doesn't affect you anymore." My response to what I felt was a somewhat callous comment was that, of course, I care about what is happening in the school system in my town. Whether or not you currently have children or grandchildren in the school system, you should be concerned about what is happening within it. This led me to briefly take a look at the school impact study, and it outlines that the system should be able to handle the projected influx of students. When I look at the information, it's a lot to digest, and it was mentioned here about the year 2005, which was the peak enrollment. It discusses how enrollment in the school system was decreasing and that the influx of recent developments has helped to prevent further decrease. I'm going to skip over some of that stuff just to keep it shorter, and that there should be adequate space, especially with the renovation of the Latimer Lane for the possible projected 99 students with a new development. What you can't predict is what the needs of those students will be. It seems as though it's not just about the number of students, but the resources that are going to be or not be available for the needs of the various population that will be coming in, which may include mental health services, accommodations for special needs, individual education modifications, and other programs that might be necessary. I know at the last meeting there was at least one person from the Board of Education and maybe someone else that spoke. And I just hope that you listen to what they have to say, because no matter what the numbers say and what the grids show, with what the school system can handle with a new development, a lot has changed over the past 20 years. And the school systems and our educators are dealing with a lot. So I'm gonna skip over the traffic because that's already been talked about. This town is not what it was 24 years ago when I moved here. It's not what it was 10 years ago, and I fear that in 5 more years, it will be unrecognizable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kelly Rothfuss. I live at 14 Nutmeg Court. I just want to say thank you for your comments about education, because as a teacher, I can tell you I'm on the front lines, and I can tell you what an impact having 2, 3 kids just added to your class, the amount of work and issues that come up. So I do thank you for that. It is a major issue and a major problem. Even though I don't teach in Simsbury, I teach in Hartford, but it's a big deal when there's a huge influx of kids. I'm not gonna, there are a lot of stuff that's been talked about, but one thing about infrastructure and traffic, when you said about this, how many cars was the estimate that was going to be traveling in and out of the, how many? Okay, did that 3,000 include just the residents, or was that the delivery drivers and the UPS and the Amazon and the DoorDash and everything? Was that the whole shebang? That was just a question. Second thing, along the lines that this is near a wetlands, and what was also brought up by somebody about all the different lights. Those lights impact the wildlife at the wetlands. In wetlands, as we know, are protected areas, and the biological residents there need to be protected. And light is a major problem and issue when it comes to animals in the wetlands, especially with certain species and breeding and things of that nature. That just being said, also another thing about everything always being a rental. We talked about it, but one thing that hasn't quite said is that people can be setting down roots in a rental property, but the greed of a developer or management company can then upset those people. We want more money for a property, and people who have lived there and tried to set down roots and have their kids go to school or build whatever life they have, that can be overturned and uprooted by the greed of developers and management companies, simply because, oh, the market value says we can now charge $500 more. You just outpriced people, and now they've got to leave and find someplace else. That doesn't build a community. That rips it apart. And last but not least is just the aggressive nature of the development. It's disrespectful and irresponsible. You can have development. I'm not against it. That's a perfect place to have development and to grow our city into and have housing and things like that. But this is just overly aggressive. And this is not my first zoning meeting. Some of you might recognize me. Hello. Okay? It's about the aggressive nature of these developers. They are looking for their bottom line and their money. They are not concerned about the character of where they're building. They're looking for their money. And that's why they're proposing these 8 buildings, 4 stories high, pave it all, because they don't care. They want their money. There is a way to compromise between developers and a community to make something happen. However, we don't usually see that because it cuts down the developer's bottom line. And that's what we need to kind of stick to. There can be development, it can be responsible, it can be respectful. Of all parties can win on this side. It's just so, is the zoning board going to hold firm? Or are they gonna cave in for the dollars, whatever? But that's just me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Lori Boyko from 15 Oakhurst Road. This is an enormous project. I'm not sure, but it may be the biggest this town has ever seen. If not the biggest, certainly one of the most significant in terms of population growth all at once. The outcome of your decision will impact this town and every single one of the current residents for decades, literally for a generation or more. This is not and cannot be a simple listen then vote scenario. Every facet of this must be scrutinized. I've spent hours poring over the documents and I haven't even scratched the surface. This is one of the single most important decisions you will ever make representing us. I ask you to make this decision with the utmost of care and due diligence. In light of the significance of this decision, with all due respect and sincerity, I have to wonder if Commissioner Sauls might consider recusing himself from this discussion and decision. I don't pose this thought lightly, and I presume his integrity and intention to put the best interests of the town of Simsbury at the forefront. But he is a registered paid lobbyist and legislative director for Desegregate Connecticut, an organization that specifically actively lobbies the state and municipalities for increased development of this type of high-density housing. While he doesn't have a direct financial interest in this specific property, I would ask that he consider whether the appropriate action might be to recuse, given that his manager, Peter Harrison, has expressed at the last meeting that his employer or manager has the desire for a particular outcome here. Again, it is not the integrity of Commissioner Sauls that is being questioned whatsoever. Rather, on a number of occasions, the Supreme Court of Connecticut has, and I quote from Kovalik versus Planning and Zoning Commission, had repeated occasion to reaffirm the principle that public policy requires the members of zoning boards and commissions cannot be permitted to place themselves in a position in which personal interest may conflict with public duty. The good faith of the official is of no moment because it is the policy of the law to keep him so far from temptation as to ensure the exercise of unselfish public interest. The administration of power demands the highest public confidence." End quote. Connecticut General Statute 8-11 states, in part, "No member of any zoning commission shall participate in the hearing or decision of the commission of which he is a member upon any matter in which he is directly or indirectly interested in a personal or financial sense." I'm not an attorney. I'm not rendering a legal opinion. But as a concerned resident, I noticed that a number of zoning decisions were rendered by Connecticut courts as invalid in circumstances when a commissioner with an interest participated in a decision, and I would hate to see taxpayers exposed to litigation costs unnecessarily. I implore every commissioner and resident to read the applicant's response to the town comments that was posted, and I request on behalf of everyone in town that you keep this hearing open through your next meeting, given the holiday timing of these meetings and information that has recently come in and is still to come in. I've had other people that couldn't be here tonight ask me to say that as well. Staff raised so many critical questions that were not adequately addressed or were glossed over by the applicant. For example, they mentioned, quote, "a small portion of the neighborhood will be visible from Hot Meadow Street." Have you seen the north section? How can you not? This is literally 1/3 of what will exist if this project is approved with their requested change to 50% net use rather than 50% of the gross area. According to the Board of Ed, the North Development has 300 units with 51 students, and the complex was zoned for central school to avoid overcrowding at Latimer. This project is nearly double in units, with a number of units substantially larger in size. So the school's assessment of 100 to 130 more school-aged children makes perfect sense. We all know that Simsbury is a sought-out school district by families with school-age children. So statewide averages as a projection from some out-of-state university in New Jersey has no real understanding of our local situation and concerns. Our schools are specifically sought out for children with special needs because of the services they provide. Just one additional student needing outplaced services, just one, could cost the town literally hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. That evaporates any thought of a net fiscal benefit. When I listened to the fiscal impact analysis tonight, my head almost exploded. They're literally talking out of both sides of their mouth. On the one hand, they try to say many of these residents may currently already live in Simsbury, so the schools may not see such an increase. On the other hand, they present additional spending that these miraculous families are going to spend in local businesses like furniture stores, clothing, and food. Do we have a furniture store? I'd like to check it out. I think we have a couple of clothing stores. I bet they'd love a couple million more dollars of sales, but I'm sure they're not getting that from this project. These projections are absurd and irrelevant. The Silverman Group is presented as a family company. That may be, but don't be fooled. They are a national developer and private equity firm with hundreds of projects of residential, commercial, industrial, medical, retail, and even aviation. So they are well equipped to find tenants for those vacant spaces, if they want to, and if they position their property appropriately. Please don't get bamboozled. Please don't cave to private equity. And please don't Jersey my Simsbury. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Charlie Getz, 72 East Weetog Street. I'm a big advocate of growth, but I think growth gets lumped together as just, it's a good thing. But there's two types of growth. There's accretive growth, which is good, and there's dilutive growth, which is bad. Accretive growth is something that builds the pie for everyone. Dilutive means that something comes in, it's now bigger, but everyone has a smaller piece of the pie. This is the definition of dilutive growth. It just simply is. The economics, which we can go through, but the average home in Simsbury, $12,000 in taxes per year. This is $5,000 shy of that. Multiply it by 580. You're sort of about $2.5 million in the hole of subsidized services. And you know, take that out for 30 years. That's an $85 million dilutive hole in our growth. Great growth. That's sort of like a bomb. That grows too, but sort of in a bad way. This is not good growth. It's dilutive by definition. The numbers that were presented this evening on the economics, Mr. Ponzi would be thrilled with those numbers. They just build on fiction. You know, my favorite one, and you can pull it apart. You know, and there's a vested interest in turning into 37 different variables because then it becomes confusing. We can't see the big picture. But just pull one out. Students. Okay, there's going to be 100 extra students, but hold on, it's 19,000. It's not really 19,000. It's 12,000 because the school's already built and the janitor's already there and all those things are already built. And so therefore, it's just a little incremental cost. When I moved to Simsbury, I didn't get that memo. I had to pay full boat. But in this case, it is a discount. But let's look at, we got a $35 million project that was just approved in this town a few years ago for a new school. And granted, the northern part of this was not the reason for that, but it was a contributing factor. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. And if you look at the plans, talk to the School of Ed, there's $100 million pipeline of new facilities that have to be built in this town. And guess what they're going to contribute to that? Because it's only 12,000. Nothing, zero. It's a free ride. That's a $100 million subsidized ride for people who are dilutive. And I agree with the lady back here. Put affordable housing there. I'm not against affordable housing. I'm for it because people who sacrifice and save, who invest in a community are great members of a community. They're good. The people who come here are not renting an apartment. They're renting Simsbury. okay? It is a bad economic decision. It is a bad character decision. It is a bad neighbor decision. And for this to be approved is bad. Now, George did point out earlier that these guys don't have to even listen to us. But by the way, if you listen to sort of the ratio, the people have spoken. Okay, nobody in this community is thrilled about this. But let's really talk about the numbers. Let's assume they're true. I think they're fiction, but I could be wrong. But assume they're true. It would cost nobody anything to set up an escrow account whereby you say, hey, listen, we're saying it's going to be this many students and we won't need any more of these services or this, that, or the other thing, and all the spends are going to be just like those numbers. They're lovely numbers. Okay. $250,000 a month off a very, very high rent roll drops into an escrow account. And if all those numbers turn out to be real, just like the Easter Bunny and unicorns, then you get to keep the money. But if you don't, guess who gets it? Simsbury. You're getting gamed if you permit this. You're getting gamed. Good luck.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you all live in Simsbury? Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. My name is Alice Seidenberg, and I live at 132 Old Canal Way. And Old Canal Way, you enter Old Canal Way exactly across from the entrance to the Hartford. And every day I drive down the street, and I see the mountain, and I see Hoopline Tower, and I'm grateful. And those 8, actually looks like 12 four-story buildings, are going to obliterate the view of Hoopline Tower. That's our last view that's left for people driving down Hot Meadow. That's why people come to town. That's why people buy their homes here, for that view. Everyone on our street is planning to retire in place rather than downsizing, because we love it here. People aren't moving to Florida, they're staying. But if this goes up, how many Simsbury residents are going to say, what's the point? And every home in Simsbury is going to lose value if we lose that view. Each of your homes, not just mine, not just everybody on my street, but everybody in town's home is going to lose value with that view. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Scully, 29 Notch Road in West Simsbury, and I'm the chair of the Sustainability Committee in town. And one of the things the Sustainability Committee has started to become more active in, is having a look at developments coming to town and helping inform the conversation about the sustainability aspects of a particular development. Back in August, we extended an invitation to the Silverman Group to come meet with the Sustainability Committee to discuss these sustainability features. As yet, we have not heard back from the Silverman Group. We are not a mandatory board, any kind of part of the mandatory review process, so it was a voluntary offer. But we would be pleased to help inform the conversation. If I understood correctly, there will be a review process whether this development conforms to the POCD. So I look forward to the results of that. I know the Sustainability Committee was active in the process of redrafting the POCD, and there are a lot of sustainability features in there. So my sense is there will be some issues that come up there. And finally, our offer to the Silverman Group to talk still stands. Thank you.
Hi, Joanne Dombrowski for Glen Hollow Lane, and I want to thank everybody on both sides for their efforts and work that they've done to date on this. I will be very brief because so much has already been said. First comment I have is that I agree with everything that's been said here about the character and the importance of keeping the character of Simsbury, including the beautiful views. I've been a resident for 38 years, I think it is, raised 3 children here. Who cannot afford to rent or buy here, even though some of them are older than my husband and I were when we could buy our house that we still have. At the other comment has to do with the financials and the numbers that have been proposed. They could come and live here at the rate, the rentals that were proposed that they're going to be charged. I don't know how long they will stay at those rates, but they are below market rates. They're renting in other towns, and they're much higher for what they get. And the other has to do with your worst case scenario that you did on the economics. You used a multiplier using the state of Connecticut. Simsbury, and people have said this, I'm just putting it more in context of the numbers, but Simsbury is top 10 usually in the state for education, and that attracts people here. So I guess I would propose that when you do your worst case scenario, that you don't use a state multiplier, but that you add on to that to reflect why people come here and about the level of education in Simsbury, because I don't think that's a fair comparison. So I guess from the number side of things, I think what they're proposing to tell you that they will charge people for rents is below market. And I think what they're saying it will cost in terms of the town paying, I think, is also not realistic. So thank you for that.
Is there anybody else who wanted to speak tonight? Okay. Well, thank you to everybody who took the time to come out tonight, even though a number of folks have departed. But we appreciate the effort to get here and share everyone's thoughts. Okay. So let me move back to the commission. I'm thinking we're ready to end the public hearing for tonight. At this point, to be resumed at the next meeting on January 17th, 7 p.m. here at the library. But on the 17th, my vision is we'll resume the public meeting, so members will have another chance to address the commission. Members of the public will have another chance to address the commission, and the applicant will have a last opportunity to address the commission. I'm thinking that will be the meeting where it's likely, based on what we know now, that we would close the public hearing and move to a public deliberation by the commission on the information that we've received to date. And it's possible we might make a decision that night, but it's also possible we may need more time. I think everyone heard the dates that George McGregor gave in terms of the sequence that the regulations in Connecticut call for decision-making, that the meeting will come on the 17th. It's 2 weeks from tonight. It happens to be a Wednesday night, and we have really 3 more days before we're required to either close the public hearing or reach a agreement with the applicant to agree to some type of extension. Now, we're not planning on the need for an extension, but if we feel like the discussion that we have on the 17th at the commission level requires that we take more time, we'll do that, and we have a few days to consult with the Silverman Group. But I mean, I don't want everyone to think that, you know, if they come on the 17th, they can be assured that there would be a decision, because that, I'm not offering that assurance. But in terms of how the calendar sort of plays out, the meeting is likely to be closing that night, the public hearing, but the decision-making process, the discussion among the commission members will be follow, and that if we can reach a decision by the evening end, then, you know, we do. If we don't, then we'll carry on, and we'll have to make adjustments. But having said that, I want to offer an opportunity to my colleagues, if you know, anyone has a different sort of view of how we might map this out for, you know, continuing the public hearing again, resuming on January 17th. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Whatever we do, we should definitely have a good amount of time for discussion amongst the commission.
Well, we have up to 65 days after the meeting closes. So
Yeah, it's,
we're not necessarily rushed, but.
there's gonna be a lot to talk about.
Right.
So,
I would agree, I think that's, personally, that's a good.
Okay.
Oh, I was just gonna clarify, so after we close the public hearing, we're not allowed to receive any information, or we just can't receive information from the public?
George wants to handle that question. It's actually the input from.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is once the public hearing is closed, you cannot receive any new information that wasn't offered during the public hearing process. So the applicant couldn't revise a study, staff couldn't revise a staff report. So no, that once you close the public hearing, that is it for any sort of public testimony, whether public or whether data generated or anything like that. You can receive clarification from town staff and the town attorney on issues that were discussed, but no additional testimony.
No, I want to follow up on that, sorry, because I did have something I wanted to talk to the Board of Ed about based on some of the conversation. So if I were to get some information, would I have to share it with the group next meeting so that it's on the record? Or can I?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
And if we did have questions, like if we're like going through based on the public comment and re-looking at things, if we have questions, can we direct those to you to then sort of
Yes.
track
Yes,
answers down for us in
absolutely.
time for the next meeting? Okay.
Yes.
And, sorry, remind me, so if we talk about this outside of just as an agenda item outside of public hearing, the commissioners speak about it, we're gonna come up with something, there's obviously gonna be some changes in any future, whatever. Does that have to then go back to public hearing for changes and adjustments?
So that's going to depend upon the nature of the changes.
Okay.
Like, reasonable changes based on input received from the public.
Right.
Is not going to require a new hearing.
Right.
If essentially we end up with a new plan of sorts, then I would certainly recommend a new public hearing.
Okay. Thank you.
Along those lines, George, would the applicant be open to extending the public hearing if changes to this are made?
I'd recommend we have that conversation on the 17th, if you
Okay.
do in fact continue this to the 17th.
And again, the issue is continuation of the public hearing. It's not the decision-making time. The decision-making time, we have 65, so. Right, okay. Anybody else? Would like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing to the 17th, 7 PM in this room, and that we adjourn this meeting.
I would do it as two different motions.
Two different
Yeah, I
motions,
wouldn't do it
okay.
as, I wouldn't adjourn and move and say,
Right, yeah.
let's continue it first, get a vote, and then adjourn.
Okay, so we need two motions, one at a time.
So I will make a motion
adjourn
to,
the public hearing.
no, to continue the
continue.
public hearing to January 17th.
I'm glad I had so many, inputs there.
Again, January 17th, 7 PM in this location,
And
at the
we need
library.
And a second.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
And those opposed, say nay. The motion passes, and so the public hearing is now closed, and it's extended to the 17th again, here at 7
It's
PM.
not closed, it's not closed, it's ended for tonight and continued.
It's adjourned, and we're continuing.
I shall make a motion
Okay.
to adjourn.
And then, thank you, Diane. And so and Tony got the second on the motion to adjourn, so any further discussion on adjournment? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. That motion passes, so we're adjourned.